Evan had spent 2 months trying to find this alpha a match. 2 months of pulling profiles and rejecting candidates and telling himself the reason none of them fit was their standards, not his feelings. 2 months of this man dropping by his office unannounced, staying too long, asking questions that had nothing to do with the search. 2 months of Evan's scent betraying him every single time they were in the same room. He ran an elite Omega matching agency. He had built the whole thing on one rule. Scent means nothing. Compatibility is everything. And it worked. It worked almost every time. Then on a Friday evening, with no one else in the building, Reed leaned against his office doorway and said, "Your scent shifts every time I walk into this room. Every single time since the first consultation." Evan stood slowly. His chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf. His neck gland was throbbing so hard he could feel it in his jaw. Cold green tea and bruised peach pouring off him, tangled up with Reed's sea salt and brass until the air between them felt combustible. "You are my client," Evan said, "then drop me." "Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I read every comment. Now back to the story." Evan did not believe in lightning bolts. He believed in spreadsheets, personality inventories, and the quiet confidence of a track record that spoke for itself. He ran Aurelius Match out of a private Back Bay townhouse in Boston, the kind of place where clients felt important the moment they walked in, and he matched people the way other professionals built bridges. With data, with structure, with the deep conviction that feelings were unreliable, and compatibility was not. He had built this agency on a single conviction. Biology was a liar, chemistry was a trap, and if you built your life around a scent match, you deserved what happened when the scent faded and you realized you had nothing else in common. He knew this because he had lived it, but that part comes later. The morning Reed walked into his office started like any other Tuesday in October. Scylla buzzed the intercom at 10:15. "Your 10:30 is early." Evan checked his calendar. New client intake. Reed, Alpha, Venture Capital. Referred by a colleague at a partner firm. Office in the financial district. No other details. "Send him up." "Mr. Briggs, please, sit down." Reed sat. He moved like an alpha who had learned not to take up too much space. Deliberate and contained, folding his tall frame into the leather chair across from Evan's desk with a precision that suggested he was aware of every inch he occupied. He wore a navy suit without a tie, the collar open, and his hair was dark enough to absorb light, catching it only when he turned his head. Evan opened a new intake file on his tablet. Standard. Professional. The pen was steady in his hand because he willed it steady. "Tell me what you are looking for," Evan said. "Someone who does not bore me." He said it like he had been asked this question before and was tired of the polite version. "That tells me what you do not want. Tell me what you do want." Reed's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Fair." He thought for a second. "I want someone who pushes back when I am wrong instead of just going along with it. Someone who has their own opinions and actually defends them. I cannot stand passive-aggressive people. If you have a problem, say it to my face." Evan wrote. His handwriting was precise, small, evenly spaced. He did not look up. "Designation preference? None. Beta, Omega, Alpha. I do not care. That is unusual for an Alpha client. I am an unusual Alpha client." Clearly, Evan set the pen down and met Reed's eyes for the first time since the handshake at the door. Gray-green, attentive, watching Evan with an interest that felt less like a client assessing a service provider and more like a man cataloging details he intended to remember. The air between them was wrong, not unpleasant. Wrong the way the air gets heavy before a storm. Evan's scent, the one he kept locked tight behind years of suppressant calibration and rigid self-control, was pressing against the surface. He could feel the bruised peach trying to surface beneath the cold green tea. He clenched his jaw and held it down. Reed's nostrils flared, almost imperceptibly. His fingers curled once against the armrest, then relaxed. Neither of them acknowledged it. Values, Evan continued, his voice level. What are your non-negotiables? Honesty. Not the polite kind, the real kind, even when it is uncomfortable. I do not want someone who agrees with me to keep the peace, and they need their own life, their own friends, their own goals. I have zero interest in being someone's whole world. That sounds exhausting for both of us. You have just described a very small fraction of my client base. Then I suppose you will have to work harder than usual. The consultation ran long. Evan asked his standard battery of questions, the ones he had refined over years of running Aurelius Match, designed to reveal not what people said they wanted, but what they actually needed. Conflict resolution style, relationship with family of origin, how they spent money, what bored them, what frightened them. Reed answered every question with the same measured directness. He did not perform vulnerability. He did not try to be charming. He simply answered, and the answers were thoughtful enough that Evan leaned forward more than once, genuinely interested before catching the impulse and sitting back. Twice during the session, Reed leaned in to look at something on Evan's desk, a printed profile template, a chart of the agency's matching methodology, and both times their proximity shrank to something that made Evan's gland pulse. The second time, Reed's scent hit Evan directly. Smoked sea salt and warm brass with a brightness underneath that Evan's brain identified before his defenses could intervene. Bergamot rind, bright and sharp and alive. Evan's pen stopped moving. He sat motionless for a beat too long, the nib pressed into the page, while his body did things his philosophy said were meaningless. Reed noticed the pause. Evan saw him notice. Neither said a word. I think that covers the intake, Evan said. His voice was steady. His hand was not. He put the pen down so Reed would not see it. Give me a couple of weeks. I will reach out when I have someone worth your time. Reed stood, buttoned his jacket, extended his hand. Evan took it. The handshake was brief and professional, and Reed's palm was warm and dry, and the brass note in his scent flared on contact. Evan let go a fraction of a second too quickly. At the door, Reed turned back. You will email me when you have candidates? Evan nodded. Reed left. His footsteps faded down the townhouse's narrow staircase. The front door opened and closed. Evan sat in his chair and did not move for a full minute. Then he pressed 2 fingers to his own neck gland. Pulsing. Warm. His scent had shifted without his permission. The cold green tea was still there, the rain-washed concrete still anchoring it. But the bruised peach had broken through, warm and unmistakable. For filling his office with an aroma he had not let surface since the last time he made the mistake of trusting chemistry. He had not lost control of his scent since Sean. So, Scylla said from the doorway. She was holding 2 mugs of coffee and looking like she had heard every word through the wall and was enjoying herself. That went well. It went fine, standard intake. Your scent is in the hallway, Evan. Even I can smell it, and you know how bad I am with scents. New soap. You are blaming your pheromones on soap. It is a very strong soap. Scylla set a mug on his desk. She was a beta, sharp the way you get when you spend years navigating a world that was not built for you. She had been Evan's business partner almost since the beginning, and before that, she had been one of his first successful matches. Her alpha husband, Devon, had come through Aurelius Match's intake process right around the time Scylla joined the team. Evan matched them. They bonded shortly after. Scylla always said Evan was the best matchmaker in the city and the worst judge of his own heart, and she meant it because her own husband had come through the agency's doors. He is attractive, Scylla said, sitting in the chair Reed had just vacated. He is a client. Those are not mutually exclusive observations. They are in this office. Evan closed the intake file. He has extremely high standards. I will need to pull from the extended database. Or, Scylla said, you could acknowledge that your scent just announced to the entire building what your mouth refuses to say. My scent is my business. Your scent is in my sinuses, Evan. That makes it literally my business. She took a sip of her coffee. When was the last time someone did that to you? Evan did not answer. Scylla already knew. Everyone who worked with Evan long enough eventually heard about Sean, though never from Evan directly. The story circulated in pieces, assembled from things Scylla had observed and things Evan had let slip during late nights at the office when the work ran out and the silence ran long. Sean had been an alpha. Evan met not long after finishing his psychology degree, back before the idea for Aurelius' match had even formed. The attraction had been the blinding kind, the type that genre-literate omegas wrote about on forums and skeptics dismissed as confirmation bias. Sean's scent had made Evan dizzy. Evan's scent had made Sean aggressive in ways that felt, at the time, like passion. They had been together for just over a year. Evan came from a family that was comfortable, not extravagant, but the kind of household where nice dinners were normal, and spending on experiences was not something you had to defend. Sean did not. He never said it outright, but it lived in every reaction. The tightness in his jaw when Evan reached for the check. The comments about the restaurants Evan picked. The way he called Evan high maintenance like it was a joke until it stopped being one. He told Evan he was too much, too particular about food, too fussy about coffee, too concerned with how things looked. He said Evan exhausted him. Said normal people did not need a $40 bottle of wine to enjoy dinner. Said Evan made everything harder than it needed to be. But the sting only came when Evan was the one paying. The one choosing. The one whose comfort with money made Sean go quiet in a way that was worse than arguing. Evan learned to read the silence. Learned which restaurants would trigger it and which would not. Learned to suggest the cheaper option before Sean could make him feel guilty for wanting the other one. He stopped wearing certain clothes, stopped suggesting weekend plans that cost more than Sean would have spent, started apologizing for preferences he used to enjoy without thinking twice. Sean called it being practical. Evan called it compromise. What it actually was, what Evan would not recognize for years, was an alpha who could not stand that his omega did not need him financially, and who punished that independence by making Evan feel defective for having it. By the end, Evan barely recognized himself. He dressed differently. He ate differently. He apologized constantly. He had become a version of himself designed to make Sean comfortable, and the original had been packed away so gradually that he did not notice it was gone. The night it ended, Evan had told Sean he would be working late. Some project, some deadline. But he finished early and decided to surprise him instead. He still had the door code from months of staying over. He let himself in quietly, thinking he would set up dinner, maybe put on music, do something nice that Sean could not call excessive because it was just time and presence, nothing that cost anything. He noticed the shoes by the door first. Not Sean's, smaller, a pair he did not recognize. His heartbeat picked up. He set his bag down carefully. The apartment was dim, just the kitchen light on, and he could hear voices from the living room, low, laughing. He stepped around the corner. Sean was sitting on the couch with another omega. The omega was turned away from Evan, head tilted, and Sean was fastening a necklace around his neck. Evan could see the clasp, the delicate gold chain, the Van Cleef pendant catching the kitchen light. Sean's hands were gentle. His expression was soft in a way Evan had not seen directed at him in months. "What is this?" Evan said. Sean's head snapped up. The softness vanished. His hands dropped from the other omega's neck and his scent spiked, sharp and defensive. "You said you were working late," Sean said, like Evan was the one who had done something wrong by coming home early. "I wanted to surprise you." They stared at each other. The other omega had turned around now, wide-eyed, my one hand touching the pendant at his throat. He looked young. He looked like someone who let Sean pick the restaurant and did not argue about the bill and never made Sean feel like he was not enough. "Evan, Sean started. Evan walked out. He did not shout, did not wait for the explanation, did not slam the door. He walked down the stairs and onto the street and pulled out his phone and blocked Sean's number before he reached the end of the block. His hands were steady. His chest was not. The image that stayed with him was Sean's hands on the clasp. The gentleness. The Van Cleef pendant that cost more than anything Sean had ever bought for Evan. More than anything Sean had ever let Evan buy without a comment. He had never had a problem with nice things or with spending money. He had a problem with Evan being the one who could afford them, and the moment he found an Omega who let him be the provider, who made him feel like the alpha he needed to feel like, the generosity came easy. Evan built the agency on a single axiom. Attraction is noise. Compatibility is signal. He developed a proprietary methodology that assessed values, communication styles, financial habits, family expectations, lifestyle preferences, and long-term goals. He matched people based on who they actually were, not who their scent glands claimed they should want. And it worked. 4 years. Dozens of couples still together, still bonded, still sending him thank you cards at the holidays. Evan had built a machine that created lasting love for other people by rejecting everything that had destroyed his own. Not until Reed sat in his office and asked questions that sounded casual and landed like they had been aimed. The first drop-in happened the following week. Evan was reviewing profiles at his desk, a short list of 6 candidates he had pulled from the extended database for Reed's consideration. The challenge was genuine. Reed's criteria were specific without being unreasonable, which made the difficulty worse. Unreasonable clients could be negotiated down. Specific clients with legitimate standards simply had to be matched at their level, and Evan's database, while extensive, did not overflow with people who combined intellectual sharpness, financial independence, emotional directness, and the absence of passive-aggressive tendencies. The intercom buzzed. Scylla's voice. "Your 2:30 is here early." "I do not have a 2:30. "You do now. Mr. Briggs is in the lobby." Evan's hand paused on the mouse. He looked at his calendar. Empty until 4. He looked at the short list on his screen. Incomplete. He looked at his own reflection in the darkened second monitor and told himself the flush on his neck was from the radiator. "Send him up." Reed appeared in the doorway looking exactly the way he had at the intake, composed, contained, watching. Today the suit was charcoal, no tie, same precision in the way he lowered himself into the chair. "I was in the area," Reed said. "Thought I would check in rather than wait for the email. I am still narrowing down the candidates. These things take time. I am not rushing you. Just curious about the process." They both knew it had nothing to do with the process. "Short version," Evan said, pulling up his tablet. "I take everything you told me and compare it against the people in my database. But I also go by what I picked up during our conversation. Not just what you said out loud. People are bad at knowing what they actually need." "What did you observe about me?" Evan looked up. Reed was leaning forward, elbows on knees, chin on interlaced fingers. The posture brought him closer to the desk, closer to Evan. The sea salt note in his scent reached Evan's side of the room, and his gland responded with an enthusiasm he found professionally humiliating. "You say you want someone blunt, but you're more layered than that," Evan said. You would get bored with someone who only says exactly what they mean all the time. You need someone who can read between the lines, as long as what is between the lines is worth reading." Reed was quiet for a moment. "That is perceptive. That is my job. Is it always this clinical? The way you talk about people?" "Yes." "Does it work?" "Most of my couples are still together years later." "I meant for you. Does the clinical approach work for you personally?" The question landed somewhere Evan had not armored. He blinked. Once. Then, I am not the subject of this consultation. No. Reed stood. Fair enough, I will get out of your hair. He left. The visit had been brief. Evan sat at his desk and stared at the door for much longer. The second drop-in happened later that week. This time, Reed brought coffee. 2 cups, one black, one with oat milk. He handed Evan the oat milk without asking. Lucky guess, Reed said when Evan raised an eyebrow. You asked Scylla. I asked Scylla. They drank coffee in Evan's office while Evan walked Reed through the preliminary shortlist, a handful of candidates. Evan described each one's profile in clean, professional terms, the same language he used with every client, and the entire time his body was doing something his philosophy could not explain. His scent was settling, like it did in the rarest consultations when the pheromone environment in the room simply worked. The green tea and the sea salt were not competing. They were coexisting in the air between the two men like they had been designed to share the same space. Evan ignored this. Forcefully. Reed listened to each profile. You were asked sharp questions and rejected 2 candidates on the spot for reasons that were annoyingly valid. One had described their ideal evening as quiet nights in, which Reed correctly identified as a mismatch with his own preference for engaged activity. The other had listed flexible schedule as a priority, which Reed interpreted as code for someone without strong independent ambitions. You are impossible, Evan said. I am selective. There is a difference. The difference is most of my database. Then I suppose you will have to keep looking. Reed set his empty coffee cup on the desk. Same time Thursday? This is not a standing appointment. It could be. Evan opened his mouth to say something professional and boundary reinforcing. What came out was, fine. Thursday. Reed smiled. It transformed his face. The careful composure cracked, and underneath was something warm and surprised and real, like he had not expected Evan to say yes, and was pleased in a way he had not prepared for. The door closed behind him. Scylla appeared almost immediately with a post-it note. On it, she had drawn a small flower with a tally mark beside it. What is that? Evan asked. I am keeping track. Of what? Unannounced visits. That is 2. I have a feeling this garden is going to grow. Scylla's garden grew. Over the next 3 weeks, Reed kept dropping by. Always brief. Always with a reason that dissolved under the slightest scrutiny. He needed to update a preference. He had a question about the timeline. He wanted to clarify something from the last conversation. None lasted long, but each one followed the same pattern. Professional discussion that gradually loosened into something that resembled, uncomfortably, the early stages of a friendship between 2 people who happened to generate electricity when they were in the same room. The gifts started small. The coffee had been the first one, but Evan told himself that was just courtesy. Then on the 3rd visit, Reed set a small paper bag on the desk alongside his jacket. Inside was a tin of loose-leaf green tea from a shop in Beacon Hill that Evan had mentioned once, in passing, during the intake. You remembered that? Evan said, turning the tin over in his hands. You said your office tea was terrible. I was in the neighborhood. He was not in the neighborhood. Beacon Hill was nowhere near the financial district. Evan put the tin in his drawer and drank from it every day for the next 2 weeks and did not examine why. On the 5th visit, they ended up talking about a restaurant Evan liked in the South End. He mentioned the wine list without thinking, the way he used to talk about things he enjoyed before he learned to edit himself around alphas. Which one? Reed asked. Evan told him. Reed pulled out his phone and made a reservation for himself on the spot. If you say the wine list is good, I trust that. Evan's chest went tight. He could not remember the last time a man had heard him talk about something he liked and responded with interest instead of judgment. On the 6th visit, Reed showed up with a box from a bakery Evan walked past every morning. Almond croissants, Evan's favorite. He had never told Reed that. "Scylla again?" Evan asked. "Scylla again. I am going to have to start paying her a consulting fee. She refused payment, said watching you try to act normal when I bring you things is compensation enough." Evan ate the croissant at his desk after Reed left and sat with the warmth of being known. Not studied, not assessed, just noticed casually and consistently by someone who paid attention to the details. "I have been told I am intimidating," Evan said during the next visit while reviewing an updated candidate profile. "By who?" "Previous partners, colleagues, my mother once." "What did you do that was so intimidating?" "I had opinions and I stated them clearly." Reed laughed. The sound was warm and unguarded, and it made Evan's chest do something he chose not to examine. "I have gotten the same feedback. My ex-business partner once told me I was exhausting to disagree with because I always had data. Having data is not a character flaw. Try telling that to someone who just lost an argument." On a later visit, Reed was early. Evan was still getting back from lunch, and they crossed paths on the townhouse steps. Evan was wearing a coat he had bought for himself the previous winter, charcoal wool, well cut, the kind of thing he chose because he liked the way it felt and the way it looked, and he had stopped needing anyone's permission for that. Reed held the door open and looked at him. "You always dress well," he said. Matter of fact, like he was observing the weather. "It suits you." Evan felt his face warm. He walked past Reed into the building and said, "Thank you," in a voice that came out softer than he intended. It was not that the compliment was unusual. He knew he dressed well. It was that a man was saying it to him. An alpha was looking at him and liking what he saw and saying so without making it weird or transactional or loaded. Just honest appreciation, and Evan had not felt that directed at him in a long time. Scylla's post-it moved from her desk to the wall behind the reception counter. 8 flowers, each one with a date. "He likes you," Scylla said one evening after Reed's 7th visit while they were closing the office. "He is a client who is invested in the process." Clients email Evan. They do not manufacture reasons to sit in your office and make you laugh. He does not make me laugh. You laughed at his comment about the salmon. It was objectively funny. You laughed so hard you spilled your coffee. I had to bring paper towels. Evan locked his desk drawer, but he was almost smiling. "I am going to find him a match, Scylla. That is what we do. That is what the business is for." "Evan, he sat in your office and described you. Everything he said he wanted. That is you. You know that, right?" Evan had considered it. During every visit, during every sharp exchange, during every moment when Reed's scent settled into the office like it belonged there. At night in his Brookline apartment, standing in his kitchen with his hands around an espresso cup, his body replaying what it felt like to have Reed in the room. He had considered it and he had rejected it, because the last time chemistry told him someone was right, chemistry was wrong, and Evan could not afford to be wrong again. After weeks of this, Evan found a match. The match was a beta, data scientist at a health tech company. Sharp, direct, financially independent, with a dry sense of humor. On paper, she scored higher than anyone Evan had seen in months. He presented the profile to Reed on the next visit. This time, there was no pretense of a reason. Reed had simply appeared at 2 in the afternoon, nodded at Scylla, and walked up to Evan's office like it was a commute. Evan slid the printed profile across the desk. Data scientist out of Cambridge. She scored highest across every dimension in your intake criteria. Reed read the profile carefully. Evan watched him read it and felt his stomach drop. "She looks excellent," Reed said. "She is. I would not present her if she were not. When can we meet? I can arrange a dinner this weekend, Saturday." Reed looked up from the profile. His eyes found Evan's face and stayed there for a beat longer than professional interest warranted. "Saturday works." Evan confirmed the date. Reed left. Scylla drew a ninth flower on the post-it, and then, for the first time, drew one with a wilted stem. "Why does that one look sad?" Evan asked, despite himself. "Because that is the one where you sent him on a date with someone else." Saturday came. Evan spent the day at the office, which was not unusual. He spent it refreshing his email, which was. He spent it thinking about Reed sitting across from her at the restaurant Evan had selected, and wondering whether she would make Reed laugh the way Evan did. Whether their conversation would have that downhill quality. Whether Reed's scent would settle in her presence the way it settled in Evan's office. And he told himself this was professional investment. He told himself he wanted the match to succeed. He told himself the tight, acidic feeling in his chest was caffeine. By 9, he had picked up his phone and put it down so many times the screen was warm. He told himself he was doing a follow-up. Routine. Normal. He hit call before he could talk himself out of it again. "Hey," Reed said. His voice was low and slightly roughened by the hour. "Just checking in," Evan said too fast. "How was the date?" A pause. "You are calling me at 9 on a Saturday to check in." "I take my work seriously." "Clearly." "How is the date, Reed?" "Good. She is smart. Interesting. We had a solid conversation about predictive modeling that I genuinely enjoyed." Evan's chest did two things at once. "That is a strong start." "It is?" Silence. Quiet, not empty. Full. A charged quiet that happens when two people on a phone line are both thinking the same thing and neither will say it. "Was there a spark?" Evan asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Define spark." "A sense that you wanted the evening to continue. A pull that went beyond intellectual engagement." Another pause. When Reed spoke again, the amusement was gone, replaced by something careful. No spark. Evan's neck gland pulsed. His scent shifted in his apartment, the green tea sharpening, the peach bleeding through. He could smell himself. He pressed his free hand against his thigh and willed his body to behave. "That is useful data," Evan said. "I can adjust the search parameters." "Evan." "Yes? Did you call because you wanted the debrief? Nay, or because you wanted to hear how it went?" The question was light, teasing almost, but underneath the lightness was a precision that Evan recognized because he used the same technique in his consultations. Ask the real question inside the casual one. See if the person flinches. "I called because it is standard procedure." "You sound flustered." "I am not flustered." "Your breathing changed when I said there was no spark." The silence that followed was charged and long, and neither of them filled it. Evan's scent was flooding his apartment now. Cold green tea and bruised peach, strong enough that he could taste it on his own tongue. His gland throbbed. Reed's voice came through the phone, low and even. "Are you jealous, Evan?" The question hung in the air. Evan could hear his own pulse in his ears. He could hear Reed breathing on the other end, waiting, not pushing, just holding the space open for an honest answer that both of them knew Evan was not ready to give. "Good night, Reed," Evan said. "Good night." The call ended. Evan sat on the edge of his bed with the phone pressed against his chest and his scent filling every corner of his apartment, and did not move for a very long time. The next visit was different. Reed arrived at the usual time, a Tuesday afternoon, and neither of them mentioned the phone call. But the energy in the room had shifted, like someone had opened a window. Everything was the same, and nothing was the same. Evan had prepared a second candidate profile, a backup, in case the first date had not worked out. He presented it with his usual precision. Reed listened with his usual attention. They discussed the candidate's communication style, their professional trajectory, their approach to conflict resolution. It was all very proper and very professional, and underneath it, the air was so thick with their combined scent that Scylla opened a window in the hallway. Reed rejected the second candidate. His reasons were valid. Evan did not argue. "So, who is your favorite?" Reed asked, leaning back. "Out of everyone you have matched, who is the one you are most proud of?" Evan considered deflecting. Instead, he said, "Scylla." "Your business partner?" "She came through the intake process back when I first started. Beta, looking for an alpha who would treat her as an equal rather than a complement. I matched her with Devon. They bonded not long after. She met her husband through your agency. She met the right person through my methodology. The agency was just the container." Reed studied him. "So you found your business partner her husband, but you will not let yourself have the same thing." It landed. Evan felt it land. He kept his face neutral, but his scent betrayed him, the peach flaring bright and warm before he locked it back down. "My personal beliefs are not relevant to the service I provide." "Maybe. But you are sitting here telling me you gave someone else what you will not give yourself. That is not professional. That is sad." The word sat between them. Evan did not respond. Reed did not push. After a moment, Reed stood, thanked Evan for the update, and moved toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back, and reached across the space between them to brush a strand of hair behind Evan's ear. Reed's fingertips grazed the skin just above Evan's ear. The contact was barely there, but their scents collided on contact. The smoked sea salt and the cold green tea crashed together and became something neither of them contained alone: sulfur and heat. The first second after a match is struck. That bright, dangerous flare before the flame steadies into something sustainable. Evan did not pull away. They stayed like that. Neither moved. Reed's hand near Evan's face, their combined scent wrapping around them both in the quiet office with the autumn light coming through the townhouse windows. Then Evan stood up and said, "We should call it a night." Reed let his hand drop. "Yeah, we should." He left. Evan stood in his office with his heart hammering and his scent wide open and the ghost of Reed's touch on his skin, and told himself this meant nothing. It meant nothing. His scent said otherwise. The rooftop happened on a Thursday. Evan had intended to present the third candidate profile. He had the file ready, annotated, airtight. But Reed arrived with takeout from a Szechuan place in Chinatown, 2 bags of it, and somehow they ended up on the townhouse's rooftop terrace instead of in the consultation room, sitting on mismatched patio chairs with the Boston skyline burning copper in the November sunset and container lids balanced on their knees. "This is not standard client protocol," Evan said, breaking apart chopsticks. "Just eat the food, Mindy Evan. I do not build rapport with clients over mapo tofu." "You are building it right now." He was, and he could not figure out how to stop it. They talked, not about the search, about their lives. Reed told Evan about his parents. They were fated mates, he said, and the phrase came out flat, like a diagnosis. Perfect scent match, instant recognition. My mother used to describe it like the floor opened up beneath her when she first caught my father's scent. She was 19. He was 21. They bonded within a month. Evan set his chopsticks down. He could hear where this was going. The problem was that they had nothing else. No shared values. No compatible communication styles. My father was possessive in ways that passed for devotion in the first year and became a cage by the third. He needed to know where she was at all times. He resented her friendships. He used the bond to monitor her emotions and then punished her for having ones he did not like. And she stayed because the bond made leaving feel like dying. Literal, physiological withdrawal. Nausea, tremors, pain in the scent gland, depression so severe she could not get out of bed when she tried to spend a weekend at her sister's house. Reed's voice stayed level, controlled. But the brass note in his scent had gone cold, and Evan realized this was not a story Reed told people. This was something he kept locked away, and he was handing it to Evan anyway. She finally left when I was in college. Took her 2 years of bond severance therapy to be able to sleep without him in the house. He paused. She lives in Vancouver now. She is happy. But I spent 18 years watching biology hold a good person hostage, and I decided I was never going to let that happen to me. The skyline had gone from copper to violet. Below them, cars moved on Commonwealth Avenue. A jogger ran along the Esplanade path. "We are doing the same thing, you know," Reed said. "You built this whole business so you would never have to trust a cent again. I hired you for the same reason. We are both running." Evan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "His name was Sean." Reed listened. Evan told him everything. The relationship. The constant criticism of his spending, his taste, his preferences. The way Sean made him feel extravagant for wanting a nice meal and guilty for ordering wine that cost more than $15. The way Evan had adjusted himself, shrunk his desires, quieted his instincts, made himself palatable to someone who found him excessive. "I thought chemistry meant we were right for each other," Evan said. "His scent made me stupid. It blinded me to everything that was wrong because the one thing my body said was right felt so overwhelming that I let it override everything else." "What happened?" "I had told him I was working late, but I finished early. Went to his apartment to surprise him. I had his door code." Evan paused. "There were shoes by the door that were not his. I walked in, and he was putting a necklace on another Omega, Van Cleef. The kind of thing he would have called ridiculous if I had wanted it." Evan's voice stayed steady, but his scent shifted. The peach retreated. The green tea went sharp and astringent. He never had a problem with nice things. He had a problem with me being the one who could afford them. The second he found someone who let him be the one in charge, all the generosity came out. The silence that followed held them both. Two people who had just handed each other the worst parts of themselves and found that the other person did not look away. "He sounds like an idiot," Reed said. Then quieter, "And he was wrong." Evan looked at him. The violet light caught Reed's face, and Evan had the sudden, visceral thought that this was the most handsome man he had ever sat across from, and the thought had nothing to do with scent. It was simpler than that. Reed held someone else's pain without trying to fix it or shrink it. He said he was wrong, like he was reading a measurement, not offering sympathy. Reed reached over. His thumb traced the line of Evan's jaw, slow and deliberate. His fingers settled at the hinge, just below Evan's ear, and stayed. Their scents merged. The match strike. Sulfur and heat. The promise of a flame. They breathed the same air. Then Evan stood up. "We should call it a night." Reed let him go. But on the way down the stairs, Evan's hand was shaking, and the peach was wide open, and he did not even try to suppress it. The weeks that followed were an exercise in structural denial. Evan threw himself into the search. He expanded the database, pulled candidates from partner agencies in New York and D.C., ran the profiles through his methodology twice. He was trying to prove his own system worked, because if the system worked, if he could find someone objectively right for Reed, then everything Evan believed was true, and the thing happening between them was just noise. Reed kept visiting. The excuses had thinned to transparency. Sometimes he did not even offer one. He simply appeared, sat down, and asked Evan how his day was going. Their banter had evolved into something that lived in the space between flirting and fighting. Reed would challenge Evan's assessments. Evan would defend them with data. Reed would find the hole in the data. Evan would fix the hole while privately marveling at the fact that someone had found it at all. "You are the most difficult client I have ever had," Evan told him on one of the later visits. "I am the most interesting client you have ever had. Difficult is what people call interesting when it inconveniences them." And underneath the banter, Ice underneath the sharpness that both of them used as armor. Something was growing that neither of them had names for yet. It happened on a Friday evening. Late. The office was empty. Scylla had left at 6. Evan was reviewing a candidate profile when Reed appeared in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking like he had come straight from a meeting that ran long. "I have a question," Reed said. "About the search?" "About you." Evan looked up. Reed was leaning against the doorframe. The brass note in his scent was warm. Warmer than Evan had ever registered it. "Have you ever run your own profile through your system?" Reed asked. "No." "Liar." "Excuse me?" "Your scent shifts every time I walk into this room, Evan. It has shifted every single time since the first consultation." "I do not know exactly what that means in your methodology, but I know what it means in mine." The air in the room went taut. Evan stood slowly. His chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf behind him. "You are my client." "Then drop me." "I cannot do that." "Why not?" "Because then I have to admit I failed, that I could not find you a match. And if I cannot find you a match, then maybe this whole thing does not work the way I said it does, and I have been lying to myself since I started this." The words came out fast and raw, and Evan heard them and wanted to take them back. Reed pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room in 3 steps, and suddenly he was close. Close enough that their scents were not merging but crashing. A collision of sea salt and green tea and brass and peach that made the air between them feel combustible. "You are not wrong," Reed said. His voice was low. "But you are not seeing the whole picture either." "Chemistry brought me Sean," Evan said, "and it brought your mother to your father. Look what that cost both of them. Your ex was all chemistry and no substance. My parents were all bond and no compatibility. But you and me." Reed stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Come on, Evan. You know what we are. We argue about the same things because we care about the same things. We are the same kind of stubborn. If I were in your database and you were not the one doing the screening, your own system would match us. And you know it." Evan's back hit the edge of his desk. Reed was close enough that Evan could feel the heat of his body through the fabric of their clothes. The brass note in Reed's scent had deepened, gone almost liquid, and Evan's gland was pulsing so hard he could feel it in his teeth. "This is a terrible idea," Evan whispered. "Probably." Reed kissed him. The kiss was weeks of drop-in visits and phone calls, and the rooftop and every charged silence that had ever stretched between them finally. Violently. Snapping. Reed's mouth found Evan's and Evan kissed back with a desperation that surprised them both. Reed's hands gripped the edge of the desk on either side of Evan's hips. Evan's hands found Reed's jaw, pulled him closer, and the sound Evan made against Reed's mouth was involuntary and undignified and real. Their scents detonated. The match strike flared so bright that both of them gasped. The green tea and the sea salt and the peach and the brass wove together into something new, something that neither of them had ever smelled before. Warm and undeniable and alive. Reed pulled back first, his forehead pressed against Evan's, both of them breathing hard. Evan's hands were still on Reed's jaw. He could feel Reed's pulse under his thumbs. Neither of them moved. Then Evan's phone buzzed on the desk. A reminder. The candidate profile he was supposed to finalize. The search he was supposed to be running. The professional distance he was supposed to be maintaining. Evan put both hands on Reed's chest and pushed gently. Reed stepped back. They stared at each other across the space, both breathing hard, both flushed, both smelling like each other. "I need time," Evan said. "Take it." Reed left. Evan stood in his office with kiss-swollen lips and a combined scent that was still settling around him like smoke, and thought, "I am in so much trouble." 1 week later, Evan made the worst decision of his career. He found Reed a match, not just a match, a showcase match, An Omega this time, patent attorney, sharp, funny, impressive on every level, the kind of match Evan would normally be proud of. He presented the profile with steady hands and a professional tone that cost him everything to maintain. Reed read the profile, looked at Evan. "This is a good match," Reed said. "The best I have found. You want me to go. I want to do my job." Evan's voice did not waver. "You came to me for a match. Let me give you one." Reed studied him. For a long moment the office was silent except for the radiator and the distant sound of traffic on Newbury Street. Then Reed folded the profile, put it in his jacket pocket, and stood. "Fine," he said. "If this is what you want, I will go." The word "want" hit Evan like a closed fist. Reed left. The door closed. Scylla appeared in the hallway with no post-it and no flower and no comment. She just looked at Evan, and her expression said everything her voice did not. Evan went home. He sat in his apartment in Brookline with every light off and his espresso machine cold, and his scent so muted it was barely there, and he realized he had just pushed the person who made his walls collapse out the door and into someone else's evening. Scylla found him at the office the next morning, early, sitting behind his desk with his coat still on. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "A while." "Evan, I think I made the worst mistake of my life." Scylla sat down across from him. She did not gloat. She just sat there and waited. Nice, because she had known Evan long enough to understand that pushing him only made him dig in harder. "I built this agency," Evan said slowly, "because I believed compatibility was everything and chemistry was nothing. And I was wrong. Not about compatibility. Compatibility matters. Everything I built works because compatibility works, but I was wrong about chemistry being noise. Reed and I have both. We have the biology and we have the compatibility. We agree on money, on ambition, on directness, on how to argue, on what matters. His intake profile is me, Scylla. Everything he described wanting. That is me. I know. And I sent him on a date with someone else because I was afraid. I know that too. Not afraid of him. Afraid that if I let chemistry in, even alongside compatibility, I will end up in the same place I ended up with Sean. Blind and small and replaced. Scylla reached across the desk and took his hand. Sean was a guy who could not handle being with someone who did not need him to pay the bills, and he punished you for it. Reed is not Sean. Reed keeps showing up to this office when he could just wait for an email, because being near you is worth the trip. That is a man who is not threatened by you. That is a man who likes you for the exact things Sean tried to make you apologize for. Evan looked at their joined hands. His scent was shifting. The peach was surfacing, tentative, warm. "The worst mistake," Scylla said gently, "was not building a business on compatibility. The business works. The methodology works. The worst mistake was deciding that you did not deserve what you give everyone else." Evan called Reed that evening. Voicemail. He called again the next morning. Voicemail. He texted, "I need to talk to you." No response. 1 day passed, 2, 3. On the third evening, Evan put on his coat and walked from Brookline to the Seaport District. He could have taken the train. He needed the walk. He needed the cold air and the time and the physical sensation of choosing to close the distance he had created. Reed's building was glass and steel and expensive in the understated way where you did not notice until you looked at the lobby. Evan gave his name to the concierge. The concierge called up. There was a pause long enough for Evan to wonder if Reed would refuse. Then the concierge nodded, and Evan rode the elevator to the 14th floor. Reed opened the door. He was in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, and his hair was uncombed, and he looked tired, a weariness that went deeper than sleep. "How was the date?" Evan asked. Reed leaned against the doorframe. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was tired of pretending he had not. "I ended it early. She was great, smart, funny, ticked every box. And the whole time I sat across from her, I kept thinking about you sitting alone in your office, wondering how it went." He paused. "I have spent my whole life making decisions with my head. This is the first time my head and everything else are pointing at the same person, and I am done pretending that does not matter." The words landed like a key turning in a lock. Everything Evan had been holding, the fear, the control, to the desperate architecture of a life built to avoid being hurt, shifted and settled into a new configuration. "I know," Evan said. "I knew when I set it up. I sent you on that date because I was scared, and I am sorry." Reed stepped aside. Evan walked in. The condo was exactly what Evan would have predicted. Clean lines, warm materials, a wall of windows overlooking the harbor, a bookshelf that was organized but not color-coded, a kitchen that was used, one very good espresso machine on the counter, and Evan almost laughed because, of course. They stood in the kitchen. Close. The harbor lights reflected off the ceiling in shifting patterns. "I spent 2 months trying to match you with someone else," Evan said, "and I knew the whole time that none of them were right. I knew it, and I kept going because admitting it meant admitting that everything I built was only half the answer. Why? Because the last time I trusted what my body told me about someone, I lost a year of my life to a guy who made me feel like I was too much, and I could not do that again." Reed leaned against the counter, listening, not fixing, not closing the gap. "But you are not Sean," Evan continued. "Sean and I had chemistry and nothing else. You and I have both. We want the same things out of life. We handle money the same way. We argue well. We challenge each other." His voice went quieter. "I sat at my desk and went through your intake answers one by one. And the stuff that actually matters, the values, the deal breakers, the way you want a relationship to work, it was me. Not everything. We are different people, but the foundation is the same." Reed was quiet for a moment. "How long have you known that?" "Since the second visit. Maybe the first. I just was not ready to admit it." Reed laughed. It was the warm one, the real one. The one that Evan had been cataloging for weeks without admitting he was keeping count. "I do not know how to do this without being terrified," Evan said. "I do not either." Reed rubbed the back of his neck. "I watched my mom spend half her life trapped by a bond because the scent was right and everything else was wrong. I swore I would never let that happen. And then I walked into your office and my whole body said this one. And I spent 2 months showing up with coffee and excuses because I did not know what else to do about it." They were close now, but close enough that their scents had tangled together without either of them moving. "We are both disasters," Evan said. "Complete disasters. But I would rather be a disaster with you than play it safe with someone who makes sense on paper." Evan kissed him. This one was different from the office. Slower. Deliberate. His hands found Reed's face and held it. Reed's arms came around Evan's waist and the contact was full body, chest to chest, and Evan felt the warmth of him through 2 thin layers of fabric, and his scent broke wide open. No resistance, no suppression. Just the cold green tea and the bruised peach pouring out of him with an honesty his words had never managed. Reed made a sound against his mouth. Low. Involuntary. His hands tightened at Evan's waist and pulled him closer, and Evan went, all the way, eyes pressing into him until there was no space left. "Stay," Reed said against his lips. "Yes." They moved from the kitchen to the hallway to the bedroom, and it was not graceful. Reed's hip caught the doorframe. Evan laughed against his mouth and then stopped laughing when Reed's hands found the hem of his shirt and paused, fingers warm against bare skin, a question in the hesitation. Evan answered by pulling it off himself. Reed stared. Evan felt the look travel across his chest, his stomach, lower, and his skin flushed hot under the attention. Reed's hands came back, tracing the line of Evan's ribs with a focus that made Evan's breath stutter. "You are staring," Evan said. "Yeah," Reed's voice had dropped. "I am." Evan reached for Reed's shirt buttons, undid them one at a time, slowly, deliberately. By the third button, Reed's breathing had gone uneven. By the fifth, his jaw was tight and his scent had thickened until the brass was almost liquid in the air. When Evan pushed the shirt off his shoulders and pressed his palms flat against Reed's bare chest, Reed made a sound that went straight through Evan's body and settled low in his stomach. They fell onto the bed together. Reed braced himself over Evan, and the weight of him, the closeness, the scent pressing down from everywhere at once, made Evan arch up before he could stop himself. Reed's mouth found the scent gland on Evan's neck, and Evan gasped hard enough that his back left the mattress. Reed's lips were warm, and his tongue was slow, and Evan's hands fisted in the sheets until his knuckles ached. Reed paused, his mouth hovering over the gland, waiting. Evan grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him closer. That was all the answer either of them needed. Reed laughed against his skin, low and relieved, and the vibration traveled through Evan's entire body. Evan reached for Reed's wrist, brought it to his mouth, and pressed his lips against the scent gland there. Reed went still. The brass note flared hot enough that Evan tasted it. Bergamot rind sharpening underneath, and the sound Reed made was low and wrecked and honest. They stopped being careful after that. Reed's mouth moved down Evan's chest, his stomach, and Evan's hand found Reed's hair and held on. Reed's hands learned the shape of Evan's hips, his waist, the dip of his spine, and everywhere he touched the scent flared brighter. Evan pulled Reed back up and kissed him hard, tasting sea salt and brass and his own green tea on Reed's tongue, and the combined scent wrapped around them both until the room smelled like nothing but the two of them. Reed's mouth found the scent gland on Evan's neck again, and Evan arched into it, his whole body pulling tight. Reed's breath was hot and unsteady against the gland, and Evan's fingers dug into his shoulders hard enough to leave marks. Reed kissed the spot, slow and deliberate, and Evan made a sound he would have been embarrassed about if he had any capacity left for embarrassment. They took each other apart, not fast, not careful either, somewhere between desperate and thorough, learning what made the other one gasp, what made them go quiet, what made them grip harder. Reed's hands on Evan's thighs, Evan's teeth on Reed's collarbone. I am the way Reed said Evan's name like it was the only word he remembered. Afterward, they lay in sheets that smelled like both of them, and Evan pressed his face against Reed's chest and listened to his heartbeat slow down. So, how close was it? Reed asked into Evan's hair. Your intake answers versus mine. Close on the things that matter. Values, money, how we argue. Not identical. You are messier than I am. You think documentaries count as a date. You eat cereal for dinner and call it a meal. It is a meal. It is not a meal, but the big stuff lines up. Evan paused. The stuff Sean and I never lined up on. The stuff your parents never lined up on. That is where we match. Reed kissed the top of his head. I can live with cereal being our biggest disagreement. Same. Evan pressed his face into Reed's chest and breathed him in and fell asleep before he could finish a thought. 3 months later. Evan still ran the consultations. The methodology had not changed. He still matched people on compatibility, on values, on how they handled money and conflict and silence. The business worked. It had always worked. He was not about to tear it down just because his own life had taken a turn he had not planned for. But there was a new line on the intake forms now, printed in small type below the logo. Compatibility is the foundation. Chemistry is the invitation. We help you build both. Scylla had suggested it. Evan had resisted for a week before admitting she was right. Reed still dropped by unannounced. He brought coffee, nay always with oat milk. Sometimes he brought lunch and they ate at Evan's desk. Reed stealing bites off Evan's plate because he claimed everything tasted better when Evan picked it. Sometimes he just showed up, kissed Evan on the side of the head while Evan was mid-sentence with a client file, and sat in the chair across the desk like he belonged there. They still had 2 apartments, Reed's condo in the seaport and Evan's place in Brookline, but Evan's toothbrush lived at Reed's, and Reed's running shoes lived at Evan's, and most mornings they woke up in the same bed, regardless of whose name was on the lease. It had happened gradually. A few nights a week became most nights, became Evan not remembering the last time he had slept alone and not wanting to. Mornings at Reed's were the best. Evan woke up most days to Reed already scrolling through something on his phone with one hand while the other rested on Evan's hip. Evan would press his face into Reed's shoulder and breathe in the brass and sea salt, and Reed would turn and kiss his forehead, and they would lie there doing nothing because they could. "You are going to be late," Evan would say. "I own the company. That does not mean you get to be late. It means exactly that." And Reed would pull him closer and kiss him properly, slow and warm, morning breath and all, and Evan would lose another 10 minutes he did not regret. On a Sunday in early spring, they walked the esplanade along the Charles River. The air still had a bite to it, but the worst of winter was behind them. Reed's hand was in Evan's coat pocket, tangled with Evan's fingers. A couple passed them on the path. Scarves tangled together, their scents mixed so thoroughly you could not tell where one ended and the other began. Evan watched them go. "I used to think that was all science," Evan said. "Two people matched on compatibility. Numbers lining up. Now I am not so sure it is that simple." Reed glanced at him. "Getting soft on me?" "Maybe a little." Reed did not ask him to explain. He just pulled Evan's hand out of his pocket, brought it to his mouth, and kissed the knuckles. Casual. Easy, like it was nothing. Like loving Evan was the simplest thing he had ever done. They kept walking. The river glinted in the pale sun, and neither of them was in any hurry. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear from you.